There are many statements that we find in Torah, Chazal, our rabbis, that seem to be a little bit perplexing or impossible to really know in truth that whatever it is that they're saying actually occurs in the world. And sometimes, thank God, we're blessed with an illumination to be able to see that what's being said is happening. While it may not occur in my life, there might be many other Jewish people that have seen the cause and effect of a specific mitzvah or a specific act or a specific way of connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that then the experience which is promised by our rabbis actually occurs in this world. I'm going to give to you an example today. A quick example in two different stories which I heard by Ashkacha Pratis, one right after the other. The statement, as we can find it in its most short and concise language, is actually found, you can see in the back of your blue Siddurim. In the back of your blue Siddurim it talks about, it's a collection of halachas and minhagim, a collection of our laws and our customs in regards to what it is that we do with davening, with praying on a daily basis. And underneath the section that says the prayer before retiring at night, says the following: that in Chabad, Jewish people, us Jewish people that are inside of Chabad, we recite the 3 paragraphs of the Shema every night before we go to bed, even if we said the Shema at its proper time for Mervis. And then what does it say comes as a result of saying the Shema? He who reads the Shema before retiring to bed is as though he were protected by a double-edged sword. Where does it say this? It says this in the Gemara in Brachos, Daf Hey Amud Aleph. In days bygone, when Jews were enslaved and persecuted, as it is also true in modern times in certain countries, the nights were full of terror and danger. So this statement was especially true then. The statement that he who reads the Shema before retiring to bed is as though he were protected by a double-edged sword. So what it's saying here is literally, that literally in those days Jewish people's lives were in danger, and if they said the Kriyas Shema at night properly, then they were protected like there was a double-edged sword, that there was something which could slice on either side against any sort of danger. And then it says, today too, some people are troubled by a different type of terror. Not the terror of something physically occurring to them while they're sleeping at night, so they didn't need a protection in that way, but instead in our day, what's our terror? Our terror is bad dreams and nightmares. Thus we say the prayer before retiring to bed, in which we declare that God is one, and that He is the master of the world. We declare our love for God, and we can be certain of God's love for us. And through this, we can feel secure under His protection. Okay? It's a little bit of a... To say that there's a cause and effect for one's actions in this specific halacha seems a little bit funny and hazy in one's mind. To say that it protects you like a double-edged sword, which is also a statement from David HaMelech in Tehillim, is perplexing. For what reason other than the fact that I want to say Shema at night, do I need to know that if I say Shema at night, therefore I won't be terrorized either by physical enemies or by the enemies of the mind while I'm sleeping, the enemies of the subconscious? So obviously a person does a mitzvah simply because it's a mitzvah. A person connects to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The first reason and the most important reason is because of the emunah pshuta of a Jew, the simple faith of a Jew. that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants it this way. It says in the Shema, V'shach b'chov kumecha, that I say, I declare HaKadosh Baruch Hu's unity when I rise and when I fall asleep at night. Really, it says when I fall asleep, when I lie down and when I rise. And so therefore, since I say it in its literal context at the time that I'm going down to sleep, that doesn't just include at the time of saying Mariv, but also the Shema should be said right before I go to sleep. Two different opinions. The opinion of Beis Shammai, who's always more gevurdik, who's always more strict. He says, when you're laying down in bed. Hillel says, no, at the general time in which a person is about to fall asleep. So with that understanding that we have here something that the Torah is laying out for us to do. First and foremost, it's not about the cause and effect. It's because of Kadosh Baruch Hu wants us to do it. But, since we have an allusion in Brachos, in the Gemara, that we will be protected like a double-edged sword when we say Kriya Shema at night before we go to bed, then that statement of the rabbis means that literally it happens. There was one day where I was interviewing a doctor. I interviewed people for a while, and hopefully I hope to continue to interview people. I interviewed a doctor, Dr. Marshall Mervis in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I was supposed to interview his wife also, where they were going to tell me different stories from their lives that made clear to them that there's a real connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the world isn't run from just the physical design, but that also there is that factor, not just that factor, but there is that permeating resource that creates the physical design, and that permeating resource which creates and enlivens at every second that person, that physical design is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And after I interviewed the doctor, which is a fascinating interview, maybe I'll discuss it at a different time, I was supposed to then interview his wife. But his wife said, actually, I don't want to tell you my stories on camera, but I'll tell them to you personally. And she said, I give you permission, however, that if you want to reproduce the stories, if you want to write them, if you want to put them into videos, whatever it might be, through your own talking or through your own writing, you're allowed to. So this story is told directly from the source itself, and I'm just repeating it. What Mrs. Mervis said to me was the following, that when she was older, I would imagine in her 40s or so, maybe in her 50s, she was having a lot of nightmares. Every single night she would fall asleep, she would be terrorized. And for one that hasn't had real nightmares and hasn't had consistent nightmares where they don't seem to go away, night after night, you begin to be almost afraid to fall asleep. And this is the type of thing that she was going through. Night terrors. She couldn't handle it. She looked in this place, she looked in that place, and she didn't have any sort of, there wasn't something going on in her life that was so stressful that would lead to this constant development of nightmare after nightmare after nightmare every single night. You could imagine the difficulties of the person going through this. And she said, so she tried to look for an answer. How could she solve the problem? At the time, she wasn't observant to a degree which led her towards keeping Torah and mitzvahs in the most strict way. She had a relationship with God, and it was always important to her, and she grew up in a family that did keep these precepts. And she was specifically at that time learning. She was learning a lot with different Chabad rabbis. And so she went to these different Chabad rabbis. Each one was giving her a different answer. And in general, when people ask about dreams and about night terrors and different things like that, a lot of times the most general response is, don't worry about it. Dreams are just a mixture of your thoughts during the day. And therefore, The way to cure the problem is to understand and to not give them any meaning whatsoever. So if you push them out of your mind, then you'll stop having the nightmares. And that's what she was told from one rabbi, 2 rabbis, maybe even 3 rabbis. But it wasn't working. Then she ended up going to Rabbi Shei's Taub. And Rabbi Shei's Taub told her something different. Rabbi Shei's Taub said to her, "Are you saying Kriya Shema at night? Do you say the Shema?" She looked at him and she said, "No." And when she said no, she said to me, all of a sudden she was like reversed. She went in rewind to when she was a child. And what? When she was a child, apparently, her grandmother used to always come into her room. And when she was basically sleeping, if not sleeping, her grandmother would then say to her, "Zug Shema," say the Shema. So she would cover over her eyes, because it was her loving grandmother that was saying it to her, and she would say the Shema, and then she would fall asleep. She remembered saying it, and Rabbi Taub says, "Of course, you know how to say the Shema." And she said, "Yes." And he said, "Give that a try. Before you go to sleep at night, cover over your eyes and say the Shema. Declare the unity of God." She said, "Okay, fine, she'll try it, of course. She doesn't want to have to go through these nightmares anymore." She looked at me and she said to me, "I swear to you, that was the that was the answer." She said that the day she started saying the Shema, she stopped having the nightmares. And until this day, she won't go to bed without saying the Shema, because she's afraid that then she'll start to have the nightmares again. It was only a few weeks later then, that at the time I was living in Madison, and I went to the Chabad house for Shabbos meal. One of the students came up to me, and one of the students noticed that I was, appreciative of different ideas, both in Chassidus and in Kabbalah. And that person said to me, "I've been having terrible nightmares, and I don't know why. I don't know why." And that person said to me, "Do you know of anything in Torah that could possibly give me the answer for how it is that I can get rid of these nightmares?" My light bulb went up in my head, and I was like, I heard this for a reason. I heard this story for a reason. So I said to her, "Yeah, actually I do have something that might work, that might cure your problem." And she and the college student looked at me, and the college student said, "Okay, so could you share with me?" I said, "Yeah, of course." I told her the whole story that I just told to you. And then the student looked at me. The student said, "I'll give it a try." While the student was was modern Orthodox, it's not necessarily that everybody is saying Kriya Shema at night before they go to bed. And so that person said to me, promised, "I'm going to give it a try." And I would be at this Chabad house about every 2 weeks. I would be there for Shabbos dinner. And I said, perhaps in 2 weeks you'll fill me in with how everything's going. 2 weeks later I came to the Chabad house, and that same person was there, and I looked and I said, "So how's everything going with the nightmares?" The student looked at me and said, "Well, the truth is that they're not as bad as they used to be. They're not as intense, but I'm still getting them. And I'm still getting them every night, but not so bad." And I looked and I thought about it. And by Hashgacha Pratis, since I had talked to this person about it, and I had spoken to Marshal Mervis's wife previously, I thought to myself, wait a second, let me look up what's the halacha, what's the idea behind it. And I realized that there was one thing that I didn't mention to this student that was mentioned to Mrs. Mervis. What wasn't mentioned? I said, "Do you understand what's the Shema about?" Some people, they interpret the Shema to mean Shema Yisrael, Havaya Elokeinu, Havaya Echad, that God is one, meaning that God is the one, the most powerful one, the greatest one, but there might be others. But we believe in this one, this personal one. But obviously, we understand through Chassidus that that's not the way that we look at it. And it's not just that he is one, in the sense that he is the one that we look to, but instead that he is one, meaning echad, that he is the one which unifies all multiplicity, and not just unifies it, but he is every single piece of multiplicity that exists, every single thing that we see, every single thing that we think, every single thing that we hear. That our whole life and everything that we do is a part of a relationship with him. So I looked and I asked the student, is this something that you understand? Is this something that you're thinking about while you're saying the Shema before you go to bed at night? Because one can have the night terrors, one can be afraid of that which is being presented to them, both in a dream and in life. Why? Because they feel like there's a force which is working against them. But if you understand on a practical level, to understand that there's a balance here, there's one thing which can completely and totally erase those fears, that's understanding that the entirety of existence, being God, is on your side, is with you, is in relationship to you. So when you understand that, what's there to be afraid of? The student looked at me, and the student said, okay, I'll give it a try. Basically, I didn't tell the student that there's a specific kavanah to saying the Shema. And I said to the student, perhaps you'll tell me how everything's going in 2 weeks from now when I'll be back in the Chabad house. And the student said to me, okay. 2 weeks later, I asked the student, how's everything going with the nightmares? And the student said to me, they've been completely gone since I started to say them with these kavanas which you have presented to me. You see, oftentimes we're told something in Torah. Oftentimes we're given information, but we don't go out to seek to find that they are the reality of the world, that it's really happening around us. If it hasn't been something that I've experienced myself, perhaps it's something that another person has experienced. And then to say that their experience isn't relevant, an honest person's experience isn't relevant, well then you could say to yourself, well then why is mine? And further, if it's not just one person's experience, but another person, another person, another person, that helps to bring out the beauty of what the rabbis say. It helps you to understand how perfect and unerring they were, and also how perfect and beautiful the Torah is to which they derived this information. The secrets of the world are found in our lives. The secrets of the world are found in Torah. And it's just a matter of looking. So I challenge everybody that sees this, now that you understand the beauty of saying Kriya Shema Lamita, the beauty of declaring God's unity at your bed before going to sleep at night, to really and truly do it with these kavanas. These kavanas that, no terror in the world should scare me. Why? Because there's nothing in the world that's working against me. Everything is a part of my relationship with God Himself. And if that's the case, from what could there be to scare me? And now to cover the other statement that said that people saying Kriya Shema at night in a land which is actually dangerous, that saying the Shema would be a double-edged sword physically. I'm going to tell a very famous story from the Holocaust. There was a Rabbi Silver, who took over American Jewry during the Holocaust, a little bit after the Holocaust, And Rabbi Silver knew that there were many, many Jewish children that had been taken in by different monasteries and churches. And so he decided that he wanted to see, perhaps, he could get the cooperation of the American government, and he could get the cooperation of the governments in the lands which were holding on to Jewish children without those Jewish children being able to speak out for themselves. Or even they were so young that they perhaps didn't even know that they should say that they're from a parent that was Jewish. He wanted to be able, perhaps to devise a plan to take out as many as he possibly could. He got permission. And he made a deal with the churches that he would go into. And the deal was as follows. The deal was that he couldn't force anybody to leave. There had to be a way that would prove that the children which he was taking out were Jewish. So what did he say that he would do? He said that he would walk into the room where all the beds were lined up. And he would look before saying anything to anyone that they were about to fall asleep. And then when everybody was about to fall asleep, the 10 children, the 20 children, the 30 children, however many fit into this monastery, he would say out loud, Shema Yisrael, Havaya Elokeinu, Havaya Echad. And as he was saying this, he and whoever was the one that was running the monastery would hear in this children's bed, in this child's bed, in this child's bed, a response to the Shema. Shema Yisrael, all the children, Shema Yisrael that were Jewish, that remembered, Havaya Elokeinu, Havaya Echad. And they would pay attention to which child was saying the Shema, because obviously a Christian child wouldn't know this Hebrew language. And they would pull out each one of the children that said it. So here now, we have a proof of both things. And we can understand the beauty of the statement of Chazal that the Shema is like a double-edged sword when a person goes to sleep at night. That saves us both from physical destruction and it saves us from spiritual destruction in our dreams. And everybody should take upon themselves, if they're not yet saying it, or if they're not yet saying it with the proper intentions, that they say the Shema, and they say it with proper intentions, at the very least, while they're saying those few essential words of Shema Yisrael, Havaya Elokeinu, Havaya Echad, and Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusa Le'olam Va'ed.